Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining us today. We are going to get started now with exploring assessment period 1 in VPK. So before we get started, just wanted to take this opportunity really quickly to introduce myself. My name is Deborah Cruz. I am a quality and education coaching specialist here at the ELC of Broward. I started my teaching experience with sixth graders as well as third graders, which was something that I did really enjoy. But I spent most of my time in the preschool classroom. So I've taught in toddler age students, also as an education director for a center. And I have been with the ELC for 3 years now and living in South Florida for just about 4. And I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Stephanie, so she can introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Deborah. My name is Stephanie Templin, and I have been with the ELC for almost about 3.5 years as well. I am a coaching and education coaching specialist. Last year, I had the opportunity to work with VPK providers on probation, so I've had a lot of experience with the VPK programming. I have also had experience teaching up in New York as a toddler teacher and a pre-K and VPK age teacher. I went on to manage large different organizational educational sites and also became an administrator for accreditation. So I'm very excited that everybody's here. This is one of my favorite things to do is give webinars as well as take walks and do art with my little daughter, who is now 3.5 years old. She is the same exact age as when I started here at the LC pretty much right now.
Okay, we're going to move forward with some housekeeping rules. Many of you are familiar with this, but just in case, you can click on that orange rectangle with the white arrow pointing, and that's going to be how you'll be able to use your panel this evening. If you have any questions, feel free to click on the questions triangle, and this is how you'll be able to type in any questions, comments, concerns throughout tonight's webinar. You can also feel free to click on the handouts tab, and we have 5 handouts for you this evening, so you can feel free to do that now or later on in the presentation. So for your attendance and certificates, remember that all ELC trainings are for in-service hours only. Participants must complete both that post-test as well as that training evaluation survey, and that's going to be presented at the end, and it will be on the LMS system. Also, participants who arrive more than 15 minutes late after the training, unfortunately, will not be able to receive their in-service hours. This also goes for participants who do not stay for the entirety of the training. So you must be sure that you arrive on time and that you stay for the entire hour and a half. Also, in order to be marked as attended, you must log in using the GoToWebinar app or using your email address. Upon completion of the training, there's going to be a post-test as well as a training evaluation survey, and that's going to launch in your LMS account. So you can feel free to scan the QR code with your camera, or you can log into the system about 15 minutes after the webinar has completed, and you can just do those 2 forms. So we have our learning outcomes for this evening. What we hope that you take tonight. Our first one is to be able to describe different examples of formal and informal assessments, and also the best ways to deliver the AP1. Then we're going to look at ways how we can analyze and interpret assessment period 1. We're going to look at the data and then make some decisions regarding how we will view instruction. Finally, we're just going to present ways in which participants can offer support to their students based on the results of AP1. So with that, before we get started, we really just wanted to give you an example of a Florida assessment taking place a few years ago. So as you're watching it, look for anything that stands out to you. Perhaps there are any similarities or differences in your own classroom, and feel free to just jot those responses into the question box. Okay, so what were some things that you noticed? And I do see that there are a few people who are already jotting some responses into the chat box. So someone did say, I actually did not like the fact that the teacher could not find a quieter area to complete the assessment. It caused a lot of distraction for the child. And actually, that was my same thought as well. The first time I watched the video, for me, it was even super distracting that there was so much noise and chatter taking place. So definitely when we're aiming to complete these assessments, we really want to be able to complete them in a quieter space. If you do have the luxury to be in a completely separate environment, that's great, but at least, in the corner of a classroom in just a quieter area, I think that would be very helpful. Let's see. What else was stated? And someone said, yes, the young girl, she did have some of those troubles that we see in our own classroom, right? In terms of that phonological awareness. So, she was having some difficulty kind of breaking those words apart. And yes, again, too, it was very loud for the child. I agree. Exactly, Gail said too, it was distracting for me. I am happy to know that I'm not the only one. Exactly, a quiet place. So things that we really want to look forward to. So what is assessment period 1? This is going to be that time where you can provide VPK instructors with a tool that will help them identify the skills of the children in the program and guide instructional decisions. So assessment period 1 is that pre-assessment, which is during those first 30 calendar days of the VPK class schedule, beginning with the first VPK instructional day and including those non-instructional days. And then the results should be submitted within 45 calendar days. So this is an opportunity to do a box check. What that means is, what is your current status with assessment period 1? Is it 1, you have started? Number 2, you have finished, but it's not in Bright Beginnings. Number 3, you finished, but you've also input that information into Bright Beginnings. Someone also asked, I'm sorry, Stephanie, how many times can we ask the child on the assessment? Let me see.
That is a great question,
Yes.
and I'm going to refer everyone to the Bright Beginnings website where there is that DVD recording where it goes over the exact details of things like that. So I want you to hear it directly from the OEL. So I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to see where they can watch that video to get that exact number.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. So some of the responses, we're seeing actually a lot of 2s, mostly 2s. I do see a few 3s in this mix. I see a number 1. So, okay. So for the most part, it seems that many of you have finished, but you're still in that process of inputting your data into the Bright Beginnings website. There are a few who are completely done, and there are still some who are, they're on that number 1. So some of their children have been assessed already, and they're still assessing a few more. So thank you. So what are we going to do with this information, right? Florida law requires that all private and public VPK providers to administer those pre and post assessments to all children attending their VPK program. All VPK providers are responsible for administering the assessments and reporting those results by those particular deadlines. So our providers who are not on probation, they are not required to administer assessment period 2. However, it is strongly recommended that we do those 3 assessments, right? So that we can really see the growth and progress in our students and be able to better assess them and see what their needs are. So we have our first poll for the evening. It says AP1 is only mandatory for providers on probation, AP1, but it is best practice for all programs to conduct. Think about that and answer if you believe that is a true or false statement. We'll give everyone another moment or so to respond, and we'll read those results together. Okay, so we are split down the middle at 50-50. So this one was a bit of a trick question. AP1 is only mandatory for providers on probation, but is best practice for all programs to conduct. That is actually a false statement. AP2 is the assessment that is not mandatory. So AP1 is mandatory for everyone. Everyone has to complete AP1. Okay, so assessments. What is it really? So according to Oxford Dictionary, assessment is the evaluation or the estimation of the nature, quality, or the ability of someone or something. What about an assessment cycle? Well, first we're going to start with the evaluation process. Then you're going to take a look at that information and analysis and just see if it is accurate and audit it. After that, you can begin planning. So think to yourself, what changes are you going to make for improvement? Then you're going to just check those results again and look for any progresses that might have taken place, any growth, and be ready to execute other possible ways to measure that success and continue making new goals based on the current needs of your students. Then be prepared to do another evaluation. So what are those different types of assessment? First, we look at formal assessment. So it's that systematic, data-based assessments or tests that are given that measure the what and how well students have learned. So this data-driven. Your informal assessments, those are going to be more of those spontaneous forms of assessment that can really be easily incorporated in your day-to-day activities that measure the students' performance and their progress. So this is something that's just taking place throughout your day. A summative assessment is just ways to evaluate student learning at the end of an instructional unit by comparing it against some standard or a particular benchmark. And then finally, with formative assessments, it is the opportunity to monitor student learning to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by instructors to improve their teaching and also by students to improve their learning. So based on those assessments, let's take our second post today. It says that AP1 is it a formal assessment or is it informal? Okay, we'll have one more moment. Okay, so your AP1 is going to be, actually, it's going to be a formal assessment, everyone, because remember, that is data-driven. That's what makes it formal. An informal assessment is something simple as you are kind of just checking off that students are, completing a task or walking around the room really briefly. Informal, there's going to be data that you're going to look at the research, you're going to analyze the data that's given. So this makes it formal. Okay, so let's look at your VPK assessment map. The VPK assessment includes progress monitoring in your print knowledge, your phonological awareness, mathematics, and your oral language and vocabulary areas. And they're all aligned with the early learning and developmental standards for the 4-year-olds to kindergarten. Then we look at the standards and the assessment measures between the VPK and how it correlates to the early STAR literacy assessment. We still see that print knowledge is included. Phonological awareness is also included. Your oral language, then it switches up a bit more because then we focus on that early numeracy and then the independent reader skills. So they are fairly the same, but there's just a bit more on your STAR early literacy. So when delivering AP1, who does this include, right? So your VPK instructor or any of the staff members who meet the minimum qualifications to be a VPK instructor and completes that training, which is called How to Administer the VPK Assessment. And they're doing so on the DCF childcare training system. And it's going to be also those teachers or instructors who have completed the instructor-led training by viewing the VPK assessment instructional DVD. And these are going to be those students enrolled in your VPK classroom. They all have to be assessed. So when is this going to take place and where? Well, with assessment period 1, remember, it's going to be administered within those first 30 days of your VPK class schedule. And then those results have to be sent in within 45 calendar days of the VPK class schedule. Then, of course, what we just spoke about a little while ago, that whenever possible, it should occur in an area that is quiet so that your students aren't easily distracted and you can clearly hear the responses as well. And finally, why? Why are we conducting these assessments? What's the purpose? Right? We want to provide VPK instructors with information about each child's knowledge, their skills, their development at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the program in order to see the child's progress and to modify the instruction for each child. This is why this is a formal assessment, because we're going to take that data and try to see what their needs are and how we're going to differentiate that. So you have conducted AP1, right? Your assessments are completed. What's your next step? Well, you're going to enter your results in the Bright Beginnings website. Afterwards, you're going to take that opportunity, you're going to review your results, and you're going to print those data reports. Finally, after those reports are printed, you're going to just use that data and you're going to plan lessons and guide your instruction, right? You're going to see which child needs additional help and services. So here's another poll for you. After AP1, teachers should not make any changes to their practice. What do we think about that statement? So we believe that statement is a true or false sentence there. And you can feel free to respond either in the chat box or you can use the poll. So after AP1, teachers should not make any changes to their practice. That is actually false. You know, what we want to do, we want teachers to be making changes to their practice. If a teacher notices that many of her students did not perform well in the area of math or in phonological awareness, she knows that she should be dedicating more time to those areas or more time to particular students based on those results. So after AP1, you should be looking at that data, looking at those results and seeing what changes should I be making to my practice to better assist my students? So we definitely want to make changes based on those results. Okay, so what are our best practices, right? First thing we want to do is we get our schedule at the beginning of the year. We need to add our AP1, AP2, and AP3 into our calendar schedule and make sure that we block off that time throughout the year. Next, set up your data review, right? You've entered your data into Bright Beginnings, set up this data review. This should be with the staff in the VPK classroom, just so that everyone's on the same page. Be ready to then implement those changes based on the results. You're going to continue to observe and document throughout the year, and be sure to keep communication open with both your staff and the parents. So now I'm going to turn the presentation over to Stephanie, and she's going to discuss the Bright Beginnings website.
Thank you, Deborah. All right, so we're going to talk about the Bright Beginnings website, which you can see the web address is right there down below, which is brightbeginningsfl.org. This provides VPK instructors and directors with a tool that will help identify the different skill levels of each of the children of your program and guide instructional decisions, as well provide you and families resources. So this is a really great website to explore on your own at your own pace, because it's not only just for inputting assessments, it's a really good opportunity to find out more about any different topic of the different measures that we see on the VPK assessment. So we have a chat box, check. So we're going to ask you how familiar you are with the assessment reports in the Bright Beginning website. Very familiar, that means you are having that data discussion every quarter. Somewhat familiar, you once in a while checked out the reports but haven't had a formal discussion, or perhaps you're new to VPK, or your center is just not really familiar of it at all. You're not really familiar with Bright Beginnings. So just put in the questions box, the 1, 2, or 3, so we can get a good understanding of where everybody is. Okay, so we see that some of us are not familiar at all, and that is why we're here. We're here to learn, absolutely. So thank you for your honesty and letting us know. So this next activity will be very beneficial for you. Somewhat, absolutely. So somewhat is, you know, we've looked at them, but we haven't really implemented them. And it's nice that you are familiar with them, that you know that they are part of the Bright Beginnings website that you can utilize. All right, we have some more 3s coming in and a few 1s and some 2s. And then somewhat. This is great feedback, everyone. Thank you. So the majority of you really seem to be on that 2 or 3 selection, which is wonderful news, because we are going to be able to learn all about the different reports. And it's not unexpected, because often in administrative roles, the directors sometimes don't have the opportunity to take the time to print out the reports and provide them to you, or there is just not enough time in the day sometimes to remember to schedule those data review meetings. So we don't really often see the teachers inputting the results. So I can see why you would be only somewhat or not really familiar with it at all. But after this, I really welcome you to go onto the website. Again, it's brightbeginningsfl.org, and that's going to give you not only places where you can input those assessment reports, but it gives you lots of resources and prints out a parent letter, and it is a valuable tool. So definitely check out that website. So let's talk Bright Beginnings. And once again, thank you for all your participation. You guys have been excellent in the chat box and one of the fastest poll taker groups I have witnessed thus far. So let's look at what Bright Beginnings is. So Bright Beginnings is a website from the Office of Early Learning, which is used for the VPK program. On the website, you will find various resources. Like I said, you'll see the standards. There's also lesson plan resources and parent letters explaining assessment results. And there are also the area where the director or center's personnel will enter the results of the AP 1, 2, and 3 on that assessment reporting system. So you will find the link for the VPK online reporting system on the yellow box in the upper right-hand corner of the home page. So you look for that yellow rectangle. It's a little tiny to see, but that's where you're going to log in. So in the next slides, we're going to present to you a step-by-step process on how to produce the various reports. So once you log in, once you click in, log in, you're going to see this login page appear. And here's where you, of course, would enter the center's username and password. And most importantly, if you do not know what your password is and you've forgotten it, you're going to click this rectangle right here. We can't help you here at the ELC. You have to click that rectangle and go through the website to reset your password. And also there is a help desk, which will provide information for that really can help you with any login problems, and they are very quickly available to you as well. So once we've logged in to the Bright Beginnings website, we will see this page. This the VPK administration homepage. And on the screen, you'll see an arrow that will be pointing to the assessment tab. It's orange. So once you're there, you're going to go ahead and click that orange rectangle because that's actually a tab to click. So once you click on that assessment tab, the assessment page will open. First, I'd like to draw your attention to the link right there. You can see that is where you can actually view the DVD of how to administer the VPK assessment, which is great for someone who hasn't watched the DVD in a while, someone who's new to VPK is unfamiliar with the process. So I definitely recommend, if you don't have the DVD on hand or don't have a DVD player on hand, perhaps, going to this website and clicking that first link there, that really will help you. It's the VPK Assessment Administration Training DVD. So once you've done that, or if you don't need to do that, to continue on to the assessment reports, you're going to click this blue rectangle. It's actually a button, so you can proceed to the VPK assessment reporting system. All right, so once we click that blue rectangle, we are brought to the VPK assessment online reporting system. And this is now your provider profile webpage. On the panel, you'll see various tabs, and you're going to look for the assessment tabs, reports page tab, and you're going to click on it. So look, it's right in the middle. You're going to look for assessment reports. It's the middle tab. Okay, so once you've clicked the assessment reports, you'll be able to select the report of type you want to generate. You'll also be able to select the year, a classroom, and child, and an assessment period during the report you want to see. So you have a lot of options of the data that you can pull. So once you choose all the information from the drop-down menus, then the report will generate on the web page. And this is when you can save it as a PDF onto your computer in order to print it out or send it to your staff or families. And once again, I want to draw your attention. Take a photo. There's a big camera here. This is the Bright Beginnings Help Desk. It can help you with your login information. It can help you with any quick questions you have regarding the assessment and making sure that you are providing the assessment with fidelity. They are very responsive. I have to say, I was very impressed with how responsive the email address was when I had to reach out to them. So once again, see that little camera, take a little picture with your phone so you can have that information handy. All right, so now there are 5 types of assessments reports, and they're going to look mostly the same for AP 1, 2, and 3. So in the next slides, we're going to review all 5, and we're going to start with number 1, which is the child report by assessment measure. So with the child report by assessment measure, you can see, you will be able to see what each child is meeting, exceeding, or below expectations and which assessment measure that is. So let's look at this from top to bottom. You can see this, again, the title will be right here. This is the child report by assessment measure. And you'll see the classroom you selected and the child you selected in that classroom. And then you'll be able to see how they're doing in print knowledge, phonological awareness, oral language and vocabulary, and mathematics. So you'll be able to get a better full picture of each child individually. So our second type of report is the child report by assessment period. So this really helps when you do the AP2. So we're going to take a look at that now. So after your AP2 results, it's great that you can utilize this report to compare your AP1. So let me show you what that would look like at your AP2 checkpoint. And you can see, once again, your VPK center name is here. And then also the child. And then you can see the child's growth and development. Are they still meeting expectations? Are they falling below expectations? Are they exceeding expectations? And also pay close attention to this number, because it's going to really tell you how close they are to meeting and exceeding expectations, how close they are to below expectations. Because if you look down here at assessment period number 1 with mathematics, below expectations is 0 to 11. So a score of 5 compared to a score of 11 would give you a vast different approach to the child, as even opposed to, let's say, an 18 versus a 15. So a 15 is just exceeding expectations, and an 18 is really vastly exceeding expectations. So you can really guide your instruction very well that way, especially if you utilize that assessment period of 2, so that I can't stress enough for you to do. And our third type of report is called the classroom report. So let's pull that up. This is a great report because we get information about each child that we can see together. You can see we have your VPK center, and you can choose it by classroom. And on the side here, you'll have every child. We've blocked out the child's names for privacy reasons, of course. And then you'll be able to see as a group how they're doing on each assessment measure. Here you can see the assessment measure that we're looking at is the oral language and vocabulary classroom report. You can see that there are 2 children meeting expectations, and the rest are below expectations. And you can see, once again, how vastly different a score could be from a 15 almost meeting expectations compared to a 5, which is vastly below expectations, and probably wondering what happened at that assessment, if that child speaks another language, or perhaps that child just was not cooperative during the assessment, which can happen. Let's talk about report number 4, which is the center report by assessment measure. So this is going to give you the center report by classroom. So you're going to be able to choose by classroom to see how they're doing in each assessment measure. So then you can gain a nice overview of each classroom individually of how each group of children are doing. And then following that, which is a great report, is the center report by classroom. Oh, center report by assessment measure, pardon me. And this is giving you the center report by assessment measure, which is measuring all of the classrooms in your VPK center. So you know how all the classrooms are doing in print knowledge, phonological awareness, oral language and vocabulary, and mathematics. And this report is great because this can help directors and administration help to identify areas, and even teachers who really invest in their own professional development, help identify those areas of need of professional development for instructors, as it combines all those results of all those classrooms, so it can really give you a good picture of all of your teachers' strengths and where they can all take some time to find some support and you can help enrich them. So it is poll time again. So my quick, fast poll takers, our next poll for you is a true or false statement. So we're asking you, what do you think? The Bright Beginnings website can produce reports for you to better review your class and individual children's progress. Is that true or false? So I'm going to launch that poll for you now. And remember, we appreciate when everybody participates. And if you're not able to participate in the poll directly, you can always participate in the questions box. Thank you. I see some people putting their answers in the questions box now. And how detailed is the parent letter? The parent letter definitely is a wonderful resource. It helps explain the reports and helps explain what areas the child is exceeding in and how to better support them and how the child is perhaps not doing so well at. Like I said, you can choose the year that you print out an assessment report. So if you haven't had all of your information inputted yet, you can go back a year or two and print out a parent report just to get a good example of it. But that was a really great question, Gail. Thank you. Rose Clay, that's a great question. She's asking, what do you do when you try to give an assessment to a child who speaks another language? And what should we do? Unfortunately, we don't have any other options right now than to take the information that they are providing us. And this is where informal observation will be really your guide to really understand what that child knows and doesn't know. Having them show you in a different way rather than just vocally what they know and don't know by pointing at different pictures, using their bodies, and different modes of communication. So though we won't get the exact results on the AP1 results, we can use our informal tools and our informal assessments to gain information of those children who are dual language learners and who perhaps might not be as strong in that area and ready to partake in this assessment. So we have voted, so we're going to close and share the results. And the Bright Beginnings website can produce reports for you to better review your class and individual children's progress. And yes, that is true. 98% of you got that correct. What an amazing score. Pat yourselves on the back. That is one of our learning objectives. We really want you to understand what Bright Beginnings can do. Rather than just inputting the data, it can produce assessment reports that help better drive your instruction and help you change what you need to change and enhance what you need to enhance to really meet each child's needs. Okay, so let's move on to reading the reports now. We have a wonderful video of an assessment discussion meeting discussing the assessment data from a assessment period 2, I believe. So we're going to watch this process of a director and a lead teacher discussing directly the results of the VPK assessment. And I think this is a wonderful video to watch. So take note of anything that you notice between the two as they have their exchange.
We just finished our AP2 assessments. It's mid-year. How did it go?
They went well. It was I was excited to see the results and to test them and see the results. It gave me a good idea of where we're at. A couple kids in the classroom I wasn't really sure about, and this helped the testing and the results.
Have you made a goals for this marking period?
I have. I definitely, in certain areas, the class is now pretty well split. We have some that are doing exceedingly well and some that have made progress, but there's still a lot more progress I would like to see by the end of the year.
Okay, have you discussed with your co-teacher, or do you have plans yet for those children that need specific help in some of the areas?
Yes, we went over the results. There's a couple things we're thinking about doing. Specifically, there's some math concepts we want to work on. We have a couple kids that are doing exceedingly well, so we want to take what they know and extend on it and make sure they don't lose that. And there's a couple children that we still need to focus in on to give them specialized attention so that we can get them where we need them to be by the end of the year.
I'm really happy with the results today, but I'd like to see you further the children's education by bringing them to the next level. I would like to give you this class data worksheet, which is going to help you move them along. Have you taken a look at this before? This will help you get a closer look at the data that you have. Once you've filled it out and after you finish, then I can come to the classroom and have an observation of the children, and maybe I can give you additional feedback and maybe help you with some of the activities to help them move to the next level.
I think this will really help. I like that it'll help me break it down into the different groups of where they're at and help plan my whole group and small group instruction. I think I can move it to my lesson plan from there. I do think this will help me a lot. Thank you.
Good. I do look forward to coming into your classroom and then giving you my input, and hopefully I can help you move them along.
All right, so that was a great example of a data review meeting. And I posed the question before we watched the video, what do you notice when watching the video? So you can put in the chat box anything that you notice. Is it similar to meetings that you have with your director or teacher? Is it fairly different? Do you not have a meeting perhaps? And also, they mentioned that class data worksheet is something that we provided in the handouts. So definitely download that handout, that class data worksheet, which helps you really delve deeper into the assessment data and helps you divide your children into where they are meeting, exceeding, not meeting expectations, and will really help you with that planning process. So definitely check out that resource. So looking at the checkbox here, we see, well, what is the due date for the first assessment? That's going to really depend on your start date. So if you started with the Broward County school system, your start date at your due date was last week. If you started after the Broward County school system, then you would have a different due date. So you do have to get a calendar and count those 45 days, including non-instructional days, so holidays and weekends. And if anybody has trouble with the audio and the video, I always recommend just trying to check your connection with your speaker. And sometimes if you come in and come back out of the webinar, it will help. And then we have someone notice about all the feedback from the director and how the director was willing to help out and really be a mentor and a support in the classroom after viewing the assessment reports. Absolutely. And what did we notice about the length of the meeting? Did it take a lot of time from the day? Or was it a time that was easily attainable in order to fit into a busy, hectic day of VPK? That's right. Short and sweet. Absolutely. And very on point. It was very straight to the point. Short and straight to the point. And that's what it needs to be because it's data and that's what it is. Short and straight to the point. Here's the data. What are we going to do about the data? Here's some ideas to do about the data. And here's how we're going to follow up on the data. So absolutely. In and out. I like that. That's funny. So great observations with that, everyone. And I also like the duality of the amount that each individual got to talk. It wasn't overwhelmed by one individual talking the whole time. So it was a nice balance of back and forth exchanges regarding the information. So it wasn't anybody taking over the conversation, which sometimes we know can happen. Okay, so now we're going to look at the assessments results meeting template, which is a handout that we have provided for you. This is a great template to help you guide your data review discussion meetings. And after you read the AP1 results, you can utilize this to fill out and have those conversations. So we're going to have a little case study of our own utilizing a classroom of 8 students, and we're going to watch how the director have chosen to use Exhibit C and the assessment reports that they've chosen to review. And then you're going to have fun with me because we're going to read these charts together. When was the last time we read bar graphs, right? Here we go. So the teacher and director in this case study that we have presented to you have chosen to use 2 reports, and this is one of them. This is that, if you can look up at that bold up top, is the center report by classroom. So this is the teacher's individual classroom and how each child is doing in that print knowledge, phonological awareness, oral language and vocabulary, and mathematics. So let's make sense of this data. So I'm going to ask you, take a moment to really read the different columns and look at the different measures and tell us what stands out to you from this report. All right, so we're getting some great information into the chat box here. Yes, a lot of kids are below expectations. They are not meeting expectations in many of the 4 different assessment measures. And perhaps this might be a class of many dual language learners, so maybe we're not getting the whole picture of the children. And what 2 areas do you find that will need the most support inside this classroom? What are those 2 assessment measures that the teacher will really need to focus on to bring up a large percentage of her children to meet or exceed expectations? Yep, oral language and vocabulary and print knowledge. Great, great observations, everyone. And I do agree, the difference in scores in print knowledge is very significant. I would believe my assumption from this data, which is just my personal opinion, is, you know, that 75% perhaps, like someone said, could be dual language learners, and that 25% could be those families who really are actively engaged at home with educating their children. And that's the first thing a lot of families and parents and family members think are the keys to learning, is that print knowledge. So they focus a lot on that outside the classroom as well. But again, my opinion. And let's see. And yes, everyone got it. Print knowledge and oral language. And family support is powerful. And the more family support we have, the better the outcomes. Absolutely. Because as we know, families are children's first teachers. They're with them 24 hours a day throughout the weekend, and they are just as impactful, if not more, than the classroom with the experiences they contribute to the child's education. So awesome feedback, everyone. I really appreciate all the great responses that you had. So let's take a look at the second report for this case study. The second report they decided to use is this classroom report. And we're looking closely at that oral language and vocabulary, one of those two areas that we found that were very, very concerning in the classroom and would need a lot of intentional support. So again, we're going to look at this data together and see what do you notice. So what is standing out to you from this report now? What do you notice? What information can you gather from this report? What is the first thing that stands out to you in this report, with even just looking regarding the colors used in the bar graph? What do we see that is missing? Absolutely, there are no children exceeding expectations in the oral language and vocabulary classroom. So we noticed that. And yes, Rose Clay, that is a great point. We should not expect that much from the first AP1 assessment, because a lot of children, this will be their first experience in the classroom, so they have not gained those experiences to really be successful in the assessment if they have not had those opportunities. That is why we really encourage that AP2 assessment, so you can get that really strong data that's really going to give you a really great picture about the child and the child's knowledge. And yes, we do see those two children that are meeting expectations. And yeah, more than 50% of the class is behind. And then I'd like to draw your attention to the last child there and really point out the difference between what below expectations can really mean. Below expectations can mean almost meeting expectations by getting a 15. If you look at a child right before meeting expectations, but then you can look down and see that that child scored less than a 5. So they hardly even made the scale. So you can draw some different conclusions from that. Perhaps the child was not verbal during the observation, or was very distracted during the observation, or perhaps is a dual language learner. So there is a lot of different information that you can gain in this report as well, and who needs some more intervention and support in different areas specifically, and what then you can understand what you're going to do about it. Thank you, everyone, for all your great observations. And that's another great thing. I didn't even think about that, but it has happened to me. Maybe that child just wasn't feeling well that day, because that can happen. They're just off. They woke up late. The parents rushed them out the house. They're off their routine, and it just didn't work out. So there can be many different reasons. So that's why, again, combining this formal assessment with the informal assessment is so important. And adding on top that AP2 will really give you a great picture of your classroom. So let's look at this case study now. After reviewing these two reports, what Mrs. June, the teacher, and Mrs. Barbara, the director, let's take a look at their notes and what they concluded from the data. So the first thing that they noticed in their data and put in for their agenda, they were going to talk about, of course, the AP1 assessment reports. And they chose to look at the center report by class individual and by classroom, and the individual classroom child report. The center report by classroom And the individual classroom report were reviewed. Those are the ones that we reviewed. We saw them previously. And then once we saw those, then they wanted to discuss, what do you notice from the data? So that's exactly what we did. And their conclusion was that the assessment measures that need the most support currently in the classroom were print knowledge and oral vocabulary, those two areas that had the most children not meeting expectations. And then we look at classroom implications and assessment. So they first looked at print knowledge, and they had some notes about some different approaches to how they were going to approach print knowledge with the general class. And they said that they would visually connect oral language to writing and letters and add more opportunities to use names for letter knowledge, activities, and everyday interactions. So that was their plan for print knowledge. And they also had a plan for their oral language and vocabulary, which is to intentionally increase daily back and forth conversations and interactions with the children, specifically during mealtime and center time, which I think is great to have a very specific time and place that you're going to enhance interactions. And then finally, they added language modeling strategies as a classroom implication from the assessment. So they want to post and utilize open-ended questions during center time and story time, and use more parallel and self-talk throughout the day. So that would be their strategy to support their language modeling skills that will also support oral language and vocabulary. So let's look in closer at the data. So again, when we look close at the data, we can see each individual child's scores and be able to prevent them from falling behind and give them intervention when needed. So this is when small groups will come in handy. And after we review the assessment data, that we can really have very nice specific small groups in order to identify the children who need a little bit more individualized attention on a specific measure. And this also is important to remember, that the data showed who scored higher than most children in the class and who could also benefit from more individualized support. So the children on both spectrums really need that individualized support to really give them their, to enhance their skills to their potential. So how can we support these children, and where can we support these children? Because the VPK is such a short day. So meeting with children individually can happen during when the children arrive in the morning, and during center time, you can incorporate different activities. And you can even make a teacher center in center time where you meet with one-on-one with two children to work on a targeted instruction. And you can even use a few minutes on the playground. There's a lot of very physical active activities out there for these assessment measures that children really love learning through active engagement. And then you can also just be very intentional during transitions or during free play right before dismissal time is another great time where you could individually work with children. So also when working individually with children on those targeted instruction, it should be planned. And really, we don't want to go more than 5 to 10 minutes with the children, because we don't want to take them away from the other activities that they really enjoy, making it some sort of an inconvenience rather than another exciting thing that they get to do with their teacher. And we don't want it to be for an extended period of time, because we know that the attention span is just not really developmentally there. So like we were saying in the chat box, there are several reasons the child may not perform well during the assessment period, and an additional assessment will be needed to understand their areas of strength and the areas that need support. So you can use these teacher-made assessments with target skills that can be used to help determine the kind of support for those children. It also may be helpful for to ask your director or another teacher to observe the child to help you in making instructional decisions, so you have an extra set of eyes. So you can also continue to measure all children's outcomes this way. This is just one of many different options that you can find online. And then don't forget that we can gain a lot of information from the Florida 4-year-old standards. There is a lot of great information in there that gives you visual ideas and examples of what the children can do, what teachers can do, and what family members can do to enhance different skills expected to be developed by the end of the VPK year. And if you take the standards and go online, they even have some great videos and activities to show you. So now we're going to turn it back over to that director and teacher we saw at the beginning of this section. And we're going to watch that director and lead teacher have that follow-up meeting regarding and determining that individualized supporting instruction from that class data worksheet she was provided. So let's take a look at how that conversation went.
After Robin completes the class data worksheet, her director meets with her to discuss what she learned. Robin shares the activities she will use as she implements instruction.
How did you determine which children went in each category?
Earlier, I used my expected norm sheet to divide my groups down here, so it's a quick glance so I can see my numbers, and I can come up here and see which children. So I just pulled it into the groups.
The ones that I see that are exceeding expectations, do you have anything planned for them?
I went through their booklets to see, if there was anything they missed, if the consistent they needed to work on. And then from there, I noticed, the harder concepts. So we're going to work on our number recognition. This activity we can extend to the ones that are exceeding, so maybe they can work together, they can roll, they can add, they can count, they can practice counting 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8. So they can look at their different numbers. I have a couple other activities. I need to research and try and find some more that might be helpful for them.
These are good activities. Robin, we talked about the student that you had that was at a lower performance level. Tell me what you're going to do with him.
I'm going to try and be more specific when we're in maybe our group times, our whole group times, to ask him questions to make sure that I'm getting his answers. And then when we're in our centers, to make sure that I'm going to him to work maybe one-on-one with him, not necessarily pulling him out, but working with him individually so I can make sure that he's understanding the concepts that we're working on.
And did this help you?
It did. It's a good visual for me. I can take this and then make little notes within my lesson plan so that, especially with the math, that I can maybe put a little notes of specifically who I want to pull out or what I want to do in my lesson plan for it.
And Robin, how long did it take you to complete that chart?
It didn't take me that long. Maybe around 10 minutes just to fill out the basics. The planning the instruction takes a little longer for me because I'm trying to put a lot of thought into the activities that I'm doing. It's more targeted for my whole group, the small group and the individual. So that's more of like looking into the different activities I can do to make sure that they're engaged.
All right, so that was a great follow-up to that conversation to really see that partnership and those engaging questions for the teacher from the director about what was going to be changing in the classroom and giving her guidance and suggestions and support about what we could do inside the classroom. And so hopefully you are able to have these type of questions with your whole VPK team and director based on those assessment reports and that classroom data worksheet. So, and the Exhibit C report if you also find that well. All right, so now it's time to turn it back over to Ms. Deborah, and she's going to talk to us about ideas and where we need to really support that important instruction. All right, just give me one moment. We're going to make sure she is unmuted. Okay. This says you are self-muted, Deborah, so I just sent you an unmuted request. We'll give you a minute, and then we'll continue forward. So we'll see if that works. Okay, so I'm gonna just get us started. Maybe Deborah can call in and we can grab her that way, and maybe she can try to reset her system. Sometimes that happens. Technology is a little glitchy. So Deborah, anytime you're able to chime in, you are unmuted on this organizer side, and you are an organizer. I can also make you a presenter to see if that assists and helps. So now you're the presenter. So we'll give this one last shot. And it seems you're still muted. Now a request sent unmuted, and you just can't unmute. Okay, so let me. Okay, so continuing on, we are looking at the supporting instruction, and we want to really recommend to everyone to connect your curriculum and find ways that it supports the early learning developmental standards for 4-year-olds to kindergarten, the new version 2017. You can get it in print, but you can also find it online, and it's very valuable. And it's designed to help you really understand and remember what those skills, all those different skills our little 4-year-olds should know by the end of their pre-kindergarten year, not at the beginning, but at the end. And we can make sure that those targeted skills are there for the children and that are included in the lesson plan. And on the OEL website, you can also see that they have activity plans in all different areas that you can go to get some new ideas and present new lessons to your students. So let's continue on. And once again, thank you for your patience with our technological difficulties. But we're going to go back to that assessment map. Let's look again at that VPK assessment map and connect it to the Florida standards. Again, remember, we're going to pay special attention to how your students are doing in that phonological and oral language area, because that is actually one of the lowest performing areas in the whole entire state of Florida. So you really want to look at the phonological awareness and that oral language vocabulary. You can even take a picture of this, and you can see there we want to work on blending syllables, blending compound words, and learning how to delete parts of words. And vocabulary is that receptive and expressive language, how well you hear and how well you express what you think. And knowledge of things such as adjectives, verbs, tenses, prepositions, nouns, and their functions. So that's what we're really looking at the VPK assessment to measure, focusing and correlating it to the standards. So let's just review quickly the different measures that our VPK1 assessment takes place. So we have print awareness and knowledge. So that is when print knowledge is referred to a child's understanding of the written form of language. examples such as recognizing their names, recognizing different letters, and knowing what print is for and the different conventions of print, how to start from left to right. So and also it's really important for them to understand how the echo. But you also want to make sure you're identifying different parts of the book, such as the title, the front and the back covers. And different techniques we can do is we want to make sure that the children recognizes almost all the letters by names by the end of the year. The child names different letters, especially in their name. They can name some letter sounds and recognize some letter sounds. And they, like we said, and like we noticed in that report, children tend to overall perform higher in this area. So now I think I can turn this presentation back over to Deborah, and she's going to continue with the next assessment measure.
Okay, Stephanie, can you hear me now without?
We can.
Okay. I'm still getting an echo on my side, so I apologize if anyone hears that as well.
It's slight, but we'll be fine. I think we can still hear you clearly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about those technical difficulties, everyone. So, Stephanie, we did just go over that oral language and vocabulary. Is that correct?
Actually, this is where we are picking up right now. We just started here. We just finished phonological print awareness and print knowledge.
Perfect. Thank you. So yes, with our oral language and vocabulary, this is going to be that opportunity where it's going to include children's excessive speaking, their listening skills, their receptive skills. So children are going to learn to recognize and also develop the sounds of the languages that they hear. It's going to be growing vocabulary of new words and a variety of words. And it's just going to help the children to make those connections between the action and the word. So you're really going to focus on your open-ended questions. So think about those why questions, those how questions that are really going to assist the children. So we do have our last poll of the evening. It states that including conversations, parallel talk, and open-ended questions are ways to extend language through explicit instruction. Do we believe this is a true or false statement? We have this poll available now for everyone. You can feel free to jot down your response in the chat box or respond to the poll directly. Okay. So 93% of you said that this statement is true, and you are absolutely correct. So when you have these types of conversations, including that parallel talk and open-ended questions, it's going to be that way in which you can extend language with your students. So you definitely want to think about those open-ended, those how and why questions. Also with phonological awareness, this is an area that a lot of our students struggle in, right? So it's all about the ability to distinguish and hear different spoken sounds. So the child can identify individual words in a sentence. They combine words to make a compound word. The child may be able to delete a word from a compound word. The child may be able to combine syllables into words, delete a sound from a syllable, and then also remember some of those onset and rhyming words. And again, this is this area that a lot of our students really struggle in. So this is something that we want to make sure we are focusing on. Then when we look at math, remember that it's going to be just everywhere, and it helps children make sense of the world around them. So children learn by observing and interacting with their environment, and they're naturally curious about the number and also about mathematical concepts. Children's development of math understanding begins at the very first months of life, and it continues to grow and expand as they interact with others and the world around them. And for our really young children, remember that math is going to be more about that number knowledge, pattern, size, shape awareness, and then also those relationships between objects and space. So when we think about communication with our VPK families, we need to really remember the importance of these assessments, right? Stephanie took you through them and how they look and how you can use that dialogue to really just have those conversations with your parents. And we need to remember to be adaptive. So if you find yourself not being able to deliver those results to families in a face-to-face manner, just be prepared to pivot, right? So we might want to utilize Zoom conferences, FaceTime, school apps. You can feel free to call them and just make sure you're still having those conversations. You should have copies of the results available so that they can easily see and interpret the results as well. And remember, if your families are not informed, then they cannot partner with the school, and that family engagement also decreases. So now we ask for you to do just a bit of a reflection. And in the chat box, share what you plan on implementing or changing in your classroom when you're thinking about AP2. And Stephanie, I'm not going to be able to read the responses, so if you would not mind doing so, if you see any responses coming in.
Absolutely. We do have some great things coming in, and we have a lot of responses regarding the reports and how they're going to be utilizing them more and having a lot more one-on-one engagement, which is ever so important for the children, and having those one-on-one conferences even with a director and a teacher or a teaching staff. And then, oh, I love this, trying to find little moments to work with the children to really strategize and plan for them individually. So finding those moments and those special times that you can really incorporate a targeted skill into an interaction they're already engaged in. So we have a lot of great responses in the chat box. So, and this also, we also have a statement. Thank you. This helps us understand the reports in a better way. And also, again, to use the reports more. So that is some of the comments that we have, Deborah, from the reflection question.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, we really do hope that this becomes a tool that you can use and you just feel more confident as you're stepping into AP2 and you are able to utilize this webinar tonight. So let's just briefly review our learning outcomes that we accomplished today. We were able to describe those examples of formal and informal assessments and the best ways that we are going to deliver AP1, which most of us have already completed. Then Stephanie took you on this amazing part of the presentation where she was able to analyze and interpret that data in regards to making decisions for future instruction. And finally, there were just ways to offer support to our students based on the results of AP1. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Stephanie really briefly, and she's going to wrap us up this evening.
All right, so thank you, Deborah, and thank you everyone for being here this evening and taking your time to work on those learning outcomes and helping us achieve them this evening. See that little camera icon again? This is time to bring out your cell phone and collect this information. This is the VPK support contact info. If you have any specific questions regarding the VPK assessment, this is the place to go. This is straight from the Office of Early Learning. So we want to get the best information possible so you can utilize their phone number. It's toll free. They also have an email address. And what's great is they even have their business hours there too. So take a picture of this information. And then again, if you're not very familiar with the Bright Beginnings website, here is the website address for that. So we have that camera again. So we'll give you another moment to please put in your camera and take a picture of that too, so you're able to resource. Even if you don't log in, there's also, like I said, great resources there for your curriculum, for your parent involvement. So go ahead and check out that website, whether or not you actually have access to log into the website. And of course, we want to say that we have our references and resources out for you here for you to view. And we want to make sure that you really take time to download those great handouts we have for you. Like I said, we have that Exhibit C form that will help guide your conversation, that class data worksheet, which will really help support your children in instruction, an AP2 response booklet in case you are ready to try and implement or continue implementing AP2. We have that Exhibit C assessment results meeting template to guide your conversations about those assessment meetings. And we have an updated VPK assessment FAQ, which was just updated in 2021 of July. So that is a great new resource. And more information, just understanding formal and informal assessments. So once again, we want to remind you that in order to receive your certificate, you need to complete the post-test and training evaluation that will launch after this survey. This is a manual process, so you must give it a few minutes to appear on your account. To access your account, you can go to the LMS account and you can utilize that QR code there for easy access. But once again, remember, give it a little bit of time before expecting to see those documents. And remember, participants who arrived more than 15 minutes after this training has started will not be able to receive a certificate of participation since you were not able to participate for the mandatory amount of time. So we want to just say that we really appreciated your time, your patience, and all of your great feedback in the questions box. So thank you so much for taking the time to get to know the VPK assessment a little bit clearer and better. And I hope that you were able to take something with you and bring it back into your practice or bring it back to a colleague. And I will leave the last couple moments for Deborah to say anything she'd like to say before we end the webinar.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. I just want to thank everyone this evening. Thank you for bearing with us and our technical difficulties today. And just thank you for being so attentive and having such great responses. We just really hope that you got something from tonight's webinar and that you feel more prepared when you're going into AP2. So thank you again and enjoy your Tuesday evening.